Welcome, folks. Welcome to PRT. That's short for Paranormal Round Table. I'm your host, Josh Turner. People call me Wolf. My friends call me Wolf, and you are not allowed to. I'm just kidding. Anybody can call me Wolf. You can call me Josh. You can call me anything. Just don't call me late for dinner. With me is my trusty companion, Tonto. I guess I'm not wearing my makeup correctly today. Oh, yeah. You're supposed to be wearing your headdress, dude.
Yeah, I thought I looked like a dragon, but I guess I look like Tonto. Dang.
Yeah. Actually, I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about Scorpion over here.
Hey.
Oh, I didn't even notice him. Hey there, Scorp.
Scorpion's still in the studio because we did a show. So we decided that we were going to, because we do sometimes 2 to 3 shows at a time.
Yeah, just to knock them out.
And get, so we have plenty of stuff in reserve to keep you people at home happy with your insatiable appetites for the paranormal. Yeah. So Scorp is here in the studio, and he's going to join us, and I'm also with
Mushu, if you didn't know.
Yeah, in case you didn't know the annoying voice. I want to say something really quickly before we go any further. All right. People say that I'm really mean to my co-hosts and that I bully them and I joke. That's part of the shtick, okay? If obviously people are not gathering, like they're not getting it. Like I don't
getting
know.
What?
Okay, Tony. All right, here we go. Tony's like, you treat me like this all the time, man.
Oh, yeah, the abuse. That's right. Yeah. We just joke around. I mean, that's just the type of, we've always been like that. We've always messed around. Just personalities that we have. We always mess around with each other. So we like to just play around. And if you don't understand that,
you don't understand that.
People it's all in life fun.
It's all in fun. That's all it is. Just a bunch of fun.
Yeah, we banter back and forth. And, I slap him up, knock him around, kick him, every now and then.
I try to, but then he just catches me and hits me again.
Beats him about the face, breast, chest, neck, and head area. And that's it, So, no, seriously, though, folks, I Scorp's like my best friend, Tony is my godson, and I've known him since he was a little bitty kid, and we've always just gotten along. Tony, we used to take him on trips, and we'd take him to go do stuff, and, whatever.
I used to go over to y'all's place, like, for entire weekends, or if we were like doing spring break, exactly, or like just spending a long amount of times with y'all.
And you would always play with Zane and Anthony and Seth. and y'all would be and then what my mom's friend's son, I forgot his name, he'd come over. Caleb, yeah. And everybody, y'all'd all be in there playing games and whatever, and aggravate the shit out of me, because then eventually I had to take you somewhere to go swimming or something, because you would always be annoying me. Nah, I'm just kidding. You guys were good kids, man.
Just so needy, right, bro?
Yeah. And Scorp, you would go with us, and we'd go and we'd do stuff, whatever, and we'd be swimming, and I'd try to drown them and stuff, but it never worked. I was unsuccessful, but anyways.
Not long enough. I kept telling you.
So we have fun, folks. Just so you know, this is not, I'm not being mean and abusive to these people. That's how it is. We joke and we say things and we mouth off, and it's part of the stick now. And so, I'm not trying to be ugly or whatever or rude to Tony. Tony knows that, and he knows that that's how our relationship has been like that for a long time.
Yeah, and I get him back sometimes too. I mean, as you can tell.
Yeah, he gets under my skin sometimes.
Oh, I definitely do. I know I do. I mean, I think you're definitely better at it, working in the club. Like, I think you just developed like a way to break people down into tears that I don't think I would develop because I'm a good person. But
and it wasn't always the customer either.
No. Well, actually, Scorp was there when we made a big old tough guy cry one time. We didn't touch him. He just stood out. He was always running his mouth, and and he
just gave him a piece of his own medicine.
Yeah, his nickname was Duke. Mm-hmm. Literally, his nickname was Duke, and me and Scorp and D and Squid were out there, and we were teasing him, and he started crying, and he quit.
Yep.
And we were like, dude, and then the guy ended up like going to prison for like assault or something with a carjack or something. No bull. Am I lying, Scorp?
No, that's
he's a big old tough guy, dude. But then I think D whooped his butt one night, and like. It was D. I think D beat him up or something. So anyway, he ended up going to jail, and like for somebody told me like he got stabbed in prison or something. I don't know, because he had a real bad attitude, and we were just messing with him. We were all cutting each other down like we always do, and one thing led to another, and he starts crying. Like, I'm not making that up. He literally started crying, and I was like, dude, what's wrong with this guy?
No, he could dish it out, but he couldn't
take it, and I was like, and I guess he couldn't beat us up, so he quit. I quit.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I learned from my stepdad was don't wear your heart on your sleeve. I take that with me everywhere. It's like, so most people Like that's like my one advice. Like, don't let your emotions show so easily.
Yeah. My brother is one of them people, him and Thule. They'll go back and forth and they will run their mouths at each other and they'll block each other for a day on Facebook. And then the other one will be like, he's a poo-poo cockahead. I'm like, dude, you're grown men who've like been in all kinds, you've worked in the ghetto and done all kinds of, worked in clubs or the hip hop clubs, and you're upset because each other's calling each other poo-poo cockaheads, dude. Whatever, dude. I'm down with all. I'm not down with all that. And Tony knows we joke and we play. And Scorp, you know how it goes. We'll make fun of you, and then sometimes I'll get some of my own medicine back. You just have to be able to take it, dude. This is how it goes, man.
Yeah, around us, you can't have thin skin.
No, and funny though, Nelly can actually hang with us too.
Yeah, she does. All right.
She'll go back. People say, "Oh, she's so soft spoken and sweet." Yeah, she'll get you too, man.
She'll tear you up.
She has her hidden dark side.
The claws will come out.
Well, she's good at pouncing on you if you're slow on an uptake. Like if you're trying to make fun of her and you're like trying to still think of it, she's real quick on just get on you real quick. And is able to make fun of you with something. So she's real good at that. But
she
I'm gonna have to probably cut this part out so she doesn't hear it. But
she grew up with a tough family. So that being said, folks, I just want to get that out of the way. Like and subscribe. DasWolfman88@gmail.com. DasWolfman88@gmail.com. Our podcast is prtpodcast.com. prtpodcast.com. One more time for the good measure, prtpodcast.com.
That's our website.
That's our website. Yeah. All right, folks, check it out. We got all kinds of cool stuff on there. One thing I wanted to tell you too, join our groups. Cryptid Squad's doing really well. Cryptids and Paranormal Reality that's doing really well. Those are two groups that I'm an admin of, but they are not my groups. That's Lori Shivers and Michael Moran. So
Paranormal Encounters, Paranormal Lounge, PRT. I mean,
Paranormal Round Table is my main group. Yours, Tony, is
Paranormal Encounters,
and Nellie's is
Paranormal Lounge.
Paranormal Lounge. Go check it out, folks. Let us know what's going on. Scorp's involved in those too. He's a moderator.
Oh, I can't believe we forgot to say this, but we do give giveaways. We've been doing that for a while now, and usually Scorp is the one who picks them because he's very
and Zane.
Him and Zane, they switch back and forth because they're very unbiased and they don't really interact with the group as much. In the PRT group, they do mess around with some of the other groups, so that's why they choose there. But so butter them up in the comments if you want.
No, we like it that Scorp's not he's very impartial. He's very impartial.
I'm not one to really take part in having people kiss my backside.
Yeah,
to get stuff
that
doesn't work.
And our members are too smart for that anyway. They're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they know that they'll get just as much by joking and laughing with us as they would be being super nice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Folks, if you're really nice to me, though, I might hook you up. Anyways, that being said, we're going to get started with the show. What we got tonight, and like I said, Scorp's going to sit in with us because, you never know who's going to be here. It might be Zane, it might be Scorp.
Well, it's a round table. I mean, that's one of the main things we do is like we just bring people in, they sit in, they talk. I mean,
Chief, Nelly, we're all in it together.
Yep.
Anthony's usually here. Anthony's not here today, thank goodness, with scally face. The sullen face that he makes at us makes them ugly faces. I tell you, he's that gumball machine from what's it called? The regular show.
The regular show.
That's Anthony. We're like, me and Tony make a mistake. Oh, we look over, he's over there scowling at us. So, anyways, he's working tonight, so we don't have to deal with him. But we're gonna get started here tonight. What we got going on, and I'm gonna tell you right now, this is a story that I got from when I was way young, a youngin'. Now, I recently talked to a few of my cousins. One in particular that used to spend a lot of summers with me out there in this tract of land. This is on my dad's side of the family. I had some uncles. Now, they're long gone. They were my grandfather's uncles, Uncle JC and Uncle SD. So there are several of my family members on both sides that listen to my show. Now, they may know who these people are. They passed away years ago, back in the 80s, But when I was a little kid, I used to go out there and I'd spend summers out there because my grandpa would take me to go visit them, and we would eat dinner out there, and they had huge tracts of land out there, acres to explore. And me and my cousin Donnie, shout out to Donnie Fleming, guys had a very colorful life. He was a rodeo clown, a bull rider. He was a roughneck in the oil industry. Go pester him on Facebook. Look him up. His name's Donnie Fleming. He'll love it.
Yeah, I was a fan of his when he was both a bull rider and a rodeo clown.
Yeah, he's a tough kid, man. I grew up with him. He's about as country as they come. Lives out near Bryan, Texas. And he actually was with me when we were kids, and we heard this story told to us. He didn't take it too seriously, but, I did. And I actually followed up on it because I was always into that kind of stuff as I became a teenager and what happened to me when I was 15. I looked back and I was like, what was that? So I talked to a few people who were around back then, cousins of mine, and got a little more of the story. And over the course of the last several months, I've put it together as best I could. This is a crazy story, folks. Now, what happened was there were some people that lived in an area. It's in between Thorndale and Lexington. If you look at it on the map in Texas, and that area is heavily wooded. It's not far from Austin, maybe 40 miles as the crow flies. It'd probably be 40 miles. It's a very heavily wooded area. In between those two towns, there's a lot of area that could be inhabited by who knows what. And when they were young, they had some neighbors. Now, it was my Uncle JC and my great-great-uncle, and then Uncle SD, and then there was Uncle Alvin, and then there was my great-grandfather. It was Dewey. Now, they were all young men at that time, or little kids at that time when this happened. It was around the turn of the century. And back then, they were neighbors, but they weren't like right on top of each other like it is now.
It's spaced out.
Yeah. And it even is like that now out there. It's kind of, you got a neighbor, you might have a neighbor that lives a mile or two down the road. Well, back then, a neighbor might be 3 miles up the road. You know what I mean? And you had a big tract of land that was your land. And they had some friends. Now, they themselves, I believe, lived closer to the San Gabriel area, but they had a family that they did a lot of trading and business with that lived in this area in between Thorndale and Lexington. And I drove out there to that area a couple of weeks ago as prior to this recording. I don't know when this is going to air exactly, but it was back in early May. And me and my wife went out there and we went and we looked and I showed her what I thought. No, I can't be 100%, but what I think was the remains of this cabin. You've heard of stories of Bigfoot attacking people. You Tony, you know that. We've gotten stories.
Oh, yeah. I've read stories about it. It's crazy.
Yeah, and they claim that they'll punch through a windshield or throw rock. We got the story about the throwing rock thing. But we've also heard stories of them laying siege to these trappers' cabin. That's a very famous story. Kind of have something like that. It's very similar. These creatures, though, I don't know 100% if you would classify them as your standard Sasquatch, Bigfoot. I know Trey Felton out in Thorndale, very nice guy, is going to be on the show. I don't know as of this airing if he's been on or not, or if he will be. He wrote a book about the Apache Pass and all that area up there, and where and there's Bigfoot sightings. He likes to look for Bigfoot, whatever. I've gotten stories from a lot of different people about these Sasquatch type creatures, and they look like brown, like a mixture between ape and human. I don't want to say that that's what these were, but my great uncles had told me that these creatures, that they ran these people off of their property, is what they essentially did. It was a good plot of land, and these people. It was back when this happened. Like I said, it was around the turn of the century. And they were, it was hard scrabble. You know what I mean? Like these people had to live hand to mouth. Their land was everything. And so for something to make you leave, it had to have been pretty dramatic, And so if you look at this situation, like how this played out, whatever, it was like it had to be something really bad, Now, I believe, if I'm correct, it wasn't around the turn of the century. I'm sorry, it was I believe it was in the 20s, or maybe right after World War I believe, is when this happened. Because I got my great grandfather. I believe he was born right after the turn of the century, or right around the turn of the century is when they were born. All of them, they were all different ages or whatever. But that family that this happened to, it happened, I believe, right around World War I, I believe. Okay, so at that time, it was before the Depression and everything, but a lot of bad things were happening at that time. There was a Spanish flu, and people were dying and all this stuff. And it actually started with that, okay? What I was told was one of the family members, this family was a big family. They had an Irish surname. That's all I can really tell you. I don't want to, because some of the people still of the family are still alive to this day, and I have actually spoken to some of them. And I'll call them McCulloughs because that's sort of like it. McCullough. The McCullough family, they owned some land in between these two towns, like, out in the middle of nowhere in the boonies, pretty much. And they had several acres that they farmed, and their father had gotten it from his father, and so they've been out there for a long time, since the 1800s. And there were 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. One of the little girls died of cholera when she was real young, supposedly. I didn't never verify that, but I know that one of the sons, the oldest one, had gone away to World War I. He came back and he died of the flu. Now, that's kind of where it begins. He was buried out on the property, on the north end of the property. And what happened was, according to what I was told and what I was able to piece together, the story, I just try to bring it all together in one big story as best I can, folks. Something dug up the grave. Now, they were working in the field. They had buried John. That was the oldest. Actually, I believe that might be his real name. Actually, that's just what he was called. John. They said he was John. John McCullough was buried out there in the field or whatever. McCullough not being his real last name, whatever. Something dug up the grave and stole the body. So they had stories, or they had heard stories of these ape-looking type creatures running around out there for a long time. Everybody in my dad's family, in that older generation, they would make kind of joke about it and say, "You better watch it. You go out there, them boogers will get you." And they would say that. And my uncle SD he actually talked like that. And he was always smoking a cigar in his right hand, and he was always ashing it. And as a kid, I remember it blowing in my face. He'd always tell me these stories. And he would tell me these stories about the Hoxie Bridge and the Headless Horseman, and he would tell me all these stories about Bigfoot, But as a kid, I thought it was just like when my great aunt on my mom's side would tell me about the Cadejo and the Hombre Lobo. I never believed any of it. I always thought it was just a bunch of mess, and it was fun stories to hear, but I never believed it.
Yeah, with that, I never took a chance on that.
Yeah. Well, being Mexican, you can't. But when I saw the dog man or wolf man, whatever it was, when I was 15, and it all kind of brought it to be something that was real to me, something tangible. And so he told me a story one time. He goes, "Don't go out there to that holler out there," because we were out there riding around, on horses and messing around and playing. And he said, "You go down in that holler, that horse is going to buck you off. It's going to run back." He's like, "Them Bigfoots live down there." And he would call them Bigfoots, because by that point, everybody knew what a Bigfoot was, in the 80s. And he said, "They'll come down there and they'll break the horse's neck." And I was kind of waiting for him to crack a smile and laugh at me like he would. He'd kind of wink his eye. Yeah, the Bigfoot's are going to get you, He didn't laugh, and he didn't smile at me. And he goes, "I'm being serious." He goes, "Don't go down in that holler down there." He's like, "If you go a few miles past it," he's like, "that's where the old McCullough place was." He goes, and that whole family got run off from their land, and them Bigfoots, they still live out there. He said that since that 3 different families had tried to live out there, and they'd all gotten chased off. But he remembered this particular family being chased off of their land because him and his daddy had to help them, which would have been my great-great-grandfather. They had to help them move and get their stuff out of there. And he himself claimed, along with his brother JC, who lived about a quarter mile up the road, their 2 plots of land were right there next to each other. And then there were no neighbors for a long ways, acres and acres. Now, these were my great-grandfather's brothers, and they both told me different parts of the story and what they saw as kids. And what they saw was pretty crazy, because they saw these things when they went out there to try to help them. And for years, I always thought it was just a joke, but looking back on it, I don't think it was, because since then, I've talked to some people that were involved in this, and they said that, yeah, they remembered their grandfathers, or one guy in particular, his dad, talking about it really happening. And so here's the story. When the body got dug up by something, they would hear these loud howls coming from the woods at night. And there was this holler, as they call it, right in between their property and this creek. And it was kind of like a bottomland. And they said that down in that bottomland, they'd go down there to go fishing every once in a while. Well, they started to see these weird looking, like monkey, ape looking creatures I don't know what you would call them. I wouldn't call them devil monkeys because they were too big to be what you would think of as the devil monkey. And Tony, we've covered the devil monkeys. But these things were big, and they looked like Sasquatch, but with a difference. They had a slight muzzle to their face, and their faces were like ashen gray with no fur on the face. Kind of like a protruding jaw. You know what I mean? And that's how they described them. And he said that they had this really tall forehead, with a ridge on the top of the forehead that came to like a point. And you could see the hands, and the hands were flesh colored, almost like a Caucasian person's hands. And the feet were the same way. But the body and everything was covered completely in hair, and some of them were brown, some of them were reddish brown. And that's what they looked like. And they had like long hair that kind of came off their heads that was less like the what they said looked like fur almost on the rest of the body, where the head was almost like long hair, and it was red. They had like this reddish brown hair, like a ruddy color. And this is the descriptions I was able to get. They said that the eyes were real beady and black, but that they glowed at night. And if you shine a light on them or whatever, you could see that they had like these glowing eyes that were almost like a yellowy orange. That they said that they glowed like fire. And that's what I was told. Now, one of the people I talked to actually told me that the face, the reason that it was this ashen color was because they would go, like, these things were not really capable of making fire, but if you had a campsite, because some of the hunters and trappers out there would make a campsite, they would see these things go, like they would see the footprints, I should say, around their campsite. And they believed that they were taking the ash from the campsite and rubbing it on their faces and their hands for some reason. Don't know why that would be or what that was. Maybe it's some sort of get rid of mosquitoes. I don't know what that would be. But that's what I was told by one guy in particular. He said that his grandfather told him that that's what they believed, that they would see handprints and giant footprints. You know, the footprints looked weird. They were almost like really large, oversized footprints, but they only saw half of the footprint. It was almost like people that were walking
on the balls of their feet.
Yes, absolutely. And so they would see these footprints, and these trappers. There were these two trappers back in the 1880s that claimed that they had gone out there and that they were hunting in that area, and that these three ape-like monkey men, or whatever you want to call them, came up to them and literally began to throw rocks, 50 yards away from them, and actually hit one of them in the head. The other two guys that were with him had to take him, put him on the horse, and get out of there. They actually managed to kill one of the horses, and the other two guys got out of there carrying their friend, who they took into town and actually died from his wounds. That happened supposedly in the 1880s. So there's a story that went way back, to the 1880s, of this man supposedly being killed by these creatures. And they would be attracted to people who would be camping out there hunting, or people who, like this family that lived out there. And till the day that the old man died, he swore up and down that they were the ones that robbed the grave. Now, what ended up happening was they found the body of this guy half eaten and hung up in a tree. Now, this guy was a corpse. This was his son, who died of influenza. So I don't know if Bigfoot can get influenza, if they can get the flu, but they ate a body.
That's why they're so mad.
Maybe one of them died of it, and they're like, we're going back and getting them fools. They got us sick, Well, or maybe you shouldn't be eating corpse Bigfoot. You know what I'm saying? That's not healthy.
They just took all this food and they just wasted it by throwing it into the ground. What the heck?
So they went and they got it and they dug it up. And so he went out and he looked for it, and finally they found the body hanging up in a tree. They said it was about 10 feet up into a tree. Now, that's crazy because there's no human being that could have done that, Mountain lion, maybe. I don't know. Maybe. It depends on how big this guy was. I don't know how big he was. But I doubt it very seriously, because they said
a grown man. I don't know.
I don't think a mountain lion would dig him up and take him up into a tree.
Yeah.
But they said he'd looked like he'd been chewed on, and that he was partially eaten. Part of the body was missing, obviously. Now they found his remains, whatever, and they reburied him. That was the first thing that happened as far as like they would hear noises and they had caught glimpses of what they thought these things were in the tree line. Well, what really started the whole conflict between this family and these, I guess you could call them Bigfoot, was that one of them took a shot at one of them. The mother was out in the garden, of course, back then, you know, and up until I was a kid, the old timers always had gardens.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had a garden. I know, Scorp, you talk about your grandparents having a garden.
My mom
both
still
my
has a
grandparents.
garden.
Your mom,
Yeah, she's very.
and your stepdad,
Yeah,
he's
she
got a
does
garden too. Yeah.
Hmm.
So everybody had a garden, but she was out there working in the garden, you know, and one of these things walked up to the tree line and came toward her, and she saw it, just point blank, saw it face to face. She saw this white face on this thing, this ashen face, and she got up and she ran into the house. Well, the oldest son that was still alive, who had also gone to war, but he was still a young guy, whatever. He came out and he opened fire on this thing, and supposedly hit it right in the left side of its hip, according to the legend. He hit it in its hip, and it took off and ran into the woods and was messed up or whatever, and it was screaming. Then they heard screams and howls all night long, culminating in the next day, 2 of their pigs were missing. Now, up to that point, every once in a while, chickens would go missing. They would find, like, you know, a piglet or two, something. But these were sows, big old giant pigs, 400-pound pigs that they just were just gone. They just disappeared that night, and they were staying in the house because they were terrified. And they didn't have electricity. Folks in Texas, in the rural Texas, electricity didn't even come until like 1950s. So these people didn't have running water, they didn't have electricity. One of the younger kids had gone out to the outhouse the next morning, and something literally was shoving the outhouse back and forth, scaring him. And it looked into the little opening, you know, in the front of the outhouse, and he could see these really menacing looking eyes and a weird looking nose. It was like a flat nose staring in at him, and it just, you know, he heard it walking around, and he sat in there screaming and crying. And eventually, you know, his older brother comes out, sees this reddish haired creature around the outhouse, and takes another shot at this one. This thing runs, it gets down on all fours and runs away, according to the story. Now, according to what I was told, you know, like I said, I've been told the story 2 or 3 times, but it was like bits and pieces, and I put it all together. This went on for about a week. Them coming at night, getting closer and closer to the cabin. It was a dog run cabin. I don't know if you know what that is.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain to folks at home what that is, Squirt?
A dog run cabin basically is it's 2 sides with like a little breezeway in the middle. It's all one living. It's all one house. But it's almost like having a patio between, like, I guess, the kitchen.
2 parts of the house.
Yeah.
So it's not a full. It's like if we in the middle of our house had, like, if the neighbor across here was our neighbor, but it wasn't. It was just part of our house, and there was a breezeway in the middle, and we just walked over there, and that's also part of the house.
Okay, so it was like split into 2 halves.
Exactly.
You know, like a kitchen and living room on one side and the bedrooms on the other, or something like that.
Yeah, but the way this one was laid out, from what I gathered, was one side was the kids' quarters, and the other side was the mom and dad. And then they had the living room on the kids' side, and the mom and dad had the kitchen on their side, something like that. Anyways, these things eventually came into the middle of the dog run, snatched up their dogs, and literally killed them. Like one of them grabbed one of the dogs. They witnessed this. One of the kids, his name was Patrick, literally opened the door, saw one of them standing there, and the dog was yelping and screaming. It was one of the coonhounds, and he took it and twisted its body with his bare hands, threw it over its shoulder, and just walked out. Now, everybody was stunned, and the older boy wasn't there at that point. He had gone to the neighbors to try to get some help, you know, to try to get them help them move their stuff out of there because they needed to leave. This thing had just literally walked right up. So one of the younger kids came out and tried to attempt to shoot at one of these things. One of these other ones ambushed him and snatched the gun away from him and tossed it out into the yard, a rifle, and then went into the house and grabbed one of the little girls, one of the youngest ones, grabbed her and began to try to leave with her, tried to walk off with this little kid. And according to the story, the mother had gone like just ape poop, I guess what I was going to say, no pun intended. And she grabbed a cast iron skillet and hit this thing upside the head 3 or 4 times, and the little kid was dropped in the yard. And the mother was smacked so hard that it broke her jaw, and she fell backwards. And then one of these things bit one of the second oldest kids that was still alive and drug him across the yard and tore part of his ankle off to where he had to go. Like, he couldn't walk. He was disabled for the rest of his life. It literally stripped the meat from his leg, from his lower leg. These things were described to me as having really big canines, sort of a flat face, and then with a slight protruding muzzle with really big teeth. Didn't sound like a dog, man, because there was no tail to speak of, but it does sound like the way that they would move up and down on all fours and then stand up and then get down on all fours, that these things were some type of primate. You know what I mean? The noises that they made, supposedly that they could hear them shrieking, and then they were very adept at climbing. They could climb trees. They managed to, the night that this bad attack happened, where they killed the dogs, and that night they came through the roof of the children's side, where they were all huddled together in the bedroom area. And they were reaching in, trying to grab one of the kids because they had a bunk, and the bunk was closer to the ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it tried to grab one of the little kids. One of the little kids, her name was Caroline, and they almost managed to pull her out, like out of the roof. They were literally playing tug of war with her legs to keep her from being yanked out of the top of this dog run cabin. They ransacked the other side and took whatever food was in the other side. The one firearm that they had, they used it, to try to fend them off. They did say that they struck these creatures at least 2 or 3 different times, and they would run away, but then they would come back. And of course, there was no telephone. This was like, early 1900s. There was no telephone for them to call and say, "Hey, can you send the police?" Whatever. Eventually, the older son came back, with help. Him and his dad had come back, and that night while this was going on, they were literally under siege. And when they returned, they came with several of the men that were the surrounding farmers, or basically farmers and ranchers, what they were. And they came, and my great-grandfather's dad was one of them. Now, he came back. They were a witness to this. They literally opened fire, and like 6, 7 different guys shot at these things. They all ran into the woods and disappeared. Well, they went into the cabin and they saw this horrific scene. The kids were crying. The one kid's leg was just tore up and chewed up. So they had to, 2 or 3 of the guys had to take him, put him in a wagon, get him to town. They didn't have, cars. This was like, they were still using wagons and horses, And so they had to ride him into town to try to get him to the biggest town at that time, would have been Rockdale, I believe. And so they had to take him into town, whatever, and try to get the local doctor there, which was just, it would have been still a podunk little town, and try to get them to, minister help to him, whatever. I would assume it would be either Rockdale, Thorndale, or Lexington, because it happened between those 3 towns. So they had to render first aid or whatever, yeah. And so the kid, they took off with him. Well, my great-great-grandfather was one of the people that was left behind, supposedly, to defend this cabin or whatever, and they began to load up the wagons to try to get them out of there, whatever. One of these things came out of the woods, knocked one of the guys off of his horse, literally grabbed him by his leg and began to pull him into the woods, and then 3 of the guys opened fire on that creature. He dropped the guy and ran into the woods. They said they were 100% sure that he had been shot. The horse that was like all messed up had got itself tangled up in the harness and was all jacked up, and his leg was jacked up. The wagon had gotten knocked over, broke one of the horse's legs. It was a big mess. So they were kind of like stuck, in this situation with these Bigfoot creatures or whatever. And so they spent the night literally huddled together in this cabin waiting for daylight. And eventually daylight came, and they began to try to regroup and get everybody out again. So they had to do it little by little, piece by piece. Now, eventually, my great-grandfather and one of his brothers went to the cabin or whatever to help retrieve the people. They showed up, different people from around the area, something you don't see nowadays.
No.
People working together to help each other. And they all managed to get as much stuff out as they could and to drag as many people out, to get them to safety, whatever. The women and the children, they went to stay with a family, whatever. Well, these things weren't done. The first family that they went to was about 3 miles up the road, and their house began to be attacked. The first night that the women and children were in there, it was like a personal vendetta for these things. Not only did they destroy the farm, and they ended up like taking the livestock and running off with it or whatever. They first killed one of the donkeys that belonged to the neighboring farm, and they knew that they were going to have to go further away than just 2 or 3 miles. They were going to have to get the heck out of there, which is where my great-great-grandfather comes into play. He's like, you can go to my farm. He lived about 11 miles away. So he managed to take them to their farm to get them out of there, and to take them near the river where they lived, in this secluded area, whatever. And they when they were on the trip back, now this is the story I was given from my great uncle. They were attacked, not in a dramatic, nothing like that, but these things were throwing rocks at them. And my great uncle JC told me he got a look at one of them, and he said it looked like a tall, hairy creature, about 8 feet tall. And he said that it was gigantic. They had big old hands, big old long arms that hung down past their knees. They walked hunched over. When they would run, they would get down kind of on all fours. He witnessed one of these creatures, said that they had ashen gray faces. That was one of the things that kept coming up, that they looked white and had this weird ridge on their heads. And they had this big protruding forehead. And, being as a kid, you're being told this story, it scares the crap out of you. But I just always believed this is bull crap. You know what I mean? Like, this is just something they're telling me to scare me. But they would say things all the time. Like, there's that scarecrow comes alive and it'll come chase you and pull you out of the wind. Okay. I went up to the scarecrow and threw rocks at it. Nothing happened. Okay. There was a giant blackbird out there that would eat kids, that misbehaved. Whatever, dude, there was some weird stuff with some blackbirds. I'm not going to get into that in this episode, but eventually I will. But not a giant blackbird that would carry kids away or anything like that. So I thought this is just a bunch of more
stories.
More of their stories. But when they would talk about this particular incident, it seemed like they were genuinely frightened, and it seemed like they were being truthful. You know what I mean? Like, this was something that they were being truthful about.
It's like a matter of fact, basically.
And
like, there's no playful grin or anything like that.
Yeah, there was no joking or jokey. There was no chuckle house about it, and so having talked, their kids, and then talking to my one of my cousins, and then a couple of cousins actually, and them telling us, hey, this really happened. Like their kids told us this, who are now like they were older than my grandfather, or my grandfather's age, whatever. And I talked to them over the years, and they had told me this really happened. This was a true story. This wasn't a story about a giant blackbird carrying kids off because they stole snacks or something. You know what I mean? This was real. Now, they had never had told me anything other than, they never said like, okay, these things came out and they attacked us and we almost died. It was nothing that dramatic, but they did see one of these things come to the edge of the road while they were trying to transport that family to give them to their shelter, to their place, to their farm. And they did get rocks thrown at them, and they saw one who came out onto the road behind them and kind of ran along behind the wagon. And they all got a very good look at it. They saw this thing. It was clearly, it was male. They said it had male genitalia, and it was a very big creature, and it was screaming and hollering, and the horses were freaking out, and and it was a scary, traumatic thing that happened to them when they were just like kids, they were like teenagers or whatever. And so, you're thinking about this story, what could this be? Like what was this thing? I don't know, but obviously it had a very emotional impact on them, and they didn't like it when we would laugh at this particular story. The other stories didn't really care, but this one they did. And the only other story that they seemed to be kind of serious about was the horseman story on the Hoxie. That story is very legit. People believe in that story. Now, of course, Tony, we took you out to Hoxie.
Yeah, we went to a visit.
Yeah. And we're going to do a show about that eventually, too, if we haven't already done it by the time this airs, because there's a lot of legends and stuff about that bridge and all that. But they seem to be very genuinely They believed in that, and then the Black Bull of the bridge, and the horsemen and all that. But other than that, they never really. It was never anything very serious. They would always be like, "Oh yeah, there's a ghost over there. You know, be careful in the barn. A ghost will get you." And it's some so and so, old man such and such. You know, it's his ghost, and old man Aussie. You know, and whatever.
You think that maybe it's not because that what's it called, that like that they aren't real, but more that they're not as harmful, and that like these two, like they might actually endanger you in some way.
That's a good point. Like, I've never really thought about that. I know that they really believed in the headless ghost.
Yeah.
I know that they believed in him. They were like, "Oh no, I swear I'll put my hand in the Bible." You know, they'd always say, they never did it, but they would say that, you know. But they believed in the horseman, and they believe he was supposedly, according to them, he was a Confederate soldier who refused to bend during Reconstruction. And the Union actually hit two of his slaves that were still loyal to him. They actually hung them in his yard, and then they beheaded him. Well, he was hung, and then he was beheaded, like his head came off. And supposedly that's the story. You know, when the horse took off, I guess one of his feet got caught in the stirrup, and it yanked his head right off. That's the story. We'll get into that one day, you know, but that story, they really truly believed in that, the headless Confederate that would go around, and sometimes he would be accompanied by two slaves, like his former slaves that were his house servants, that were his friends. Supposedly, like, they followed him because they killed them, the Northerners. And folks, that actually happened quite a bit. People don't know that, but like, there were slaves that refused to like abandon their masters and whatever, for whatever reason, you know. And there were relationships between the slaves and the masters, even back in the Roman times, where, you know, like, of course, Cicero, you know, his slave tried to defend him, you know, but a lot of the slaves were not able to adjust. You know, they didn't know what they were going to do. But these two slaves in particular, they tried to defend him, I guess, and because they had already burned the house and his daughter had died. And so he was held up, you know, and so that's the story of the horseman. But like I said, one day we'll retell that. We'll go into the whole in-depth of the story of the bridge and all that. But those stories were given to me by them too. But this story in particular really had an emotional effect on them. It wasn't like, you know, these funny stories that Scarecrow is going to come to life and get you. Now, of course, we've covered a story about a Scarecrow
coming to life
and actually, but it was a child, and we've talked about this time. We don't know maybe if it was like demonic, you know, maybe that's what it was. Like, it was a demonic entity, and took in the form of the Scarecrow. But you know, but that's not what this was. This wasn't like something they were trying to scare me with. This was like being serious. And they would tell us, you know, don't go down into the certain areas because those things live down there, and they wouldn't come to their property because they had been shot at enough times, supposedly. And my great uncle told me that he shot at them a couple times when he'd see the shadows of their creatures moving in the woods. He'd take pot shots at them pretty regularly. Now, this is what's crazy. They had a neighbor that lived near the San Gabriel River, where these people ended up settling, who actually had claimed to kill one of these things. It was down in the water, and it was waiting, and it was coming across the river toward him and his wife and their little newborn baby. And he took his rifle, you know, and he literally, with a 30-30, killed it and just shot it dead. And then it just floated down the river, and it just floated away, according to what he said. Now, he claimed that to the day he died. And there was a lot of people in that area that claimed that was a true story, and that the body washed up about 4 or 5 miles up the road, and that it was near a bridge. I don't know which one. For all I know, it might have been Hoxie, but they claimed that creature, and that they took it, and the people near San Gabriel, and they buried it. And of course, these things became very cantankerous and started up, you know, attacking people and chasing people's cars. And supposedly that went on for like 10 years, these things. I know my grandfather, my dad's dad, told a story, and I know you've heard this story before, Scorp, because we've talked about it. You remember my grandma Sophie.
Yeah.
And you remember Grandma Sophie telling a story about how they went fishing down there in San Gabriel, and she swore up and down that something was throwing boulders down at them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and she told us this story. Now, Tony, I don't know if you've heard it, but my Grandma Sophie had told us the story. Now, they were these creatures, and she said that you could see up on the ridge, they looked like some really big, like, creatures that looked like giant people, and they had really long arms, and she saw them like their silhouettes. She could see them. My grandfather, being the guy that he was, of course, he starts shooting at him because he shoots at anything, or he would.
That was your grandpa.
Yeah,
though,
it's not my grandpa. So, my grandmother.
No fight or flight with him. It's just fight.
It's just fight or fight, and then ask questions later, if asked questions at all.
Yeah.
And so my grandmother's like, JD, don't be shooting at those things, because they know that there's what they call them, the hollering creatures, meaning they live in the holler, and also they holler, And so a lot of people just call them these hollering things or the hollering creatures. And these things, to me, they describe them almost like Bigfoot to me. But for whatever reason, they have like these white ashen faces. The face looks very gorilla-like from what people have told me. One of my grandmother's friends that she used to play, forgot that game they used to play. That's some weird game they played. Anyway, it was like a check game. But she said that I remember her telling me straight up, that she'd seen one when she was a kid. Now, she died about 15 years ago. She was already like almost 90 years old when she died. So her being a little kid, do the math. I mean, you're talking like turn of the century or whatever. So, when she passed away, she saw these things, but she was a little one, and she said that one of them came right up to the window and literally busted the window and began like fumbling around on the bed trying to grab her little brother and sister who were like asleep on the bed. And she ran up and literally like chased it off with like this poker that you use to stir the fires. Yeah. And that she jabbed at it, and got it to go away. And she said that these things, they lived in those areas for a long time. She said that over time, this is a story she told me. And of course, Scorp, you've heard my grandmother repeat these stories.
Yeah.
But she told us this story, and we were all eating dinner one night, my brother, we were all there. And, she said that these creatures eventually were killed. Like they were killed off. Farmers and ranchers chased them off, and eventually, they believed that they were killed, but nobody would say, hey, I killed one of these things. They would just kill them and then bury them or burn them or whatever because they wanted to get rid of them and get them off the property. But like around the turn of the century, it became like an all-out war with these damn things because they were so mean, and they were not coexisting. There was a reason why that area was not very inhabited. The Comanches didn't live in that area, folks. The Comanches had an area that they inhabited. It wasn't there. They did not live in that area. They lived in the what?
And it takes a lot to make sure to
the
scale
Comanches. The Comanches didn't live in that area because they said that the ground there was cursed. These creatures, they lived there. The Comanches lived to the west of where we're at now, and of course, Tony and Scorp, we go anywhere west of Austin, it's Comanche this, Comanche Pass, Comanche Trail, Comanche Hollow, whatever. So Comanche Cove. But over there were Apaches, but they lived way to the north of that area. They didn't live in that area at all, and so when I was a kid and I'd go out to my dad's family's place out near Bertram or Burnett, in that area, I'd find arrowheads everywhere. I had flint that you could tell they used to make fire. I had spearheads, dude. I'm not kidding. Scorp, you've seen my old collection, yeah. Somebody that stayed with us, we think stole it, but I'm not gonna get into that. But there were all these, just signs of inhabitants from the Comanches and Apaches everywhere. Well, everywhere I've ever scoured that whole area, I haven't really found any in that little area there of any of signs of like native inhabitants at all. But when you go to the north of that, now there's Apache Pass, of course, that area is called Apache Pass. So there was definitely like something there, but before that, or I don't know that anybody was living there, but those things, and I think that they were guarding their territory. And according to what I was told, that was not the McCulloughs were not the first family to be attacked or be driven out of that area. They just were the most not recent, I guess. But that they were the ones that my family had a
direct
involvement with, yes. And so that's why that whole thing happened. So that's why I know about this particular case. Now, I wanted to talk about it for a while, but like you guys know, I had to get more information about it, and I had to like do some more research and get some more information from some people. And that's the best I could could figure. You know, there was another story I had gotten about a mineral well that was right outside of Thorndale for years. People would go to this mineral baths, and they would go and they would sit in them because there was a mineral well there, and supposedly it was very rejuvenating and it was good for your skin and whatever. And this happened in 1922. There was a story that I got from one of these creatures running up out of the mineral bath when some people were being brought there by the guide or whatever that take them to the mineral bath, and they're like, what is that? And this thing jumps up out of it and is literally, while it's coming up out of the water, this is a funny story, it's actually defecating into the water. And now I got that from a cousin, from a way older cousin, and it's like older than my dad cousin. And I thought, well, that he may be pulling my leg on that one, but he claims that's true. That happened. And one of those creatures came up out of there, and they were like, to heck with that. And the people were like, that monkey man just defecated in that.
Well, anyway, let's go onto your mineral bath.
And he goes, adds to the flavor. You know, you rub it on your skin, and it's real good for it.
Oh, did you not know what mineral meant? This is what the minerals are.
Yes, the minerals that come from his intestine. But the crazy thing, though, is like there were stories of, you know, here and there of ranchers and farmers over the years running into these creatures and seeing them. But as the time went on, you know, as time progresses, whatever, you really don't get many stories anymore. And in the time, it just kind of faded away. And then you get to, like, you know, the 50s and 60s, and then reports got fewer and fewer. And I believe the lady's name was Stella, the one that told that story with my grandmother. But she was saying that they all died out, you know, that according to the, you know, whatever, that the last sighting of any of those was like in the late 60s or something. And eventually they all just quit, you know, people quit reporting them. They didn't see them anymore. Now, I know for a fact that outside of my hometown, which isn't far from there, about 17 miles, I believe, from that particular spot in the area near Nowak, and then another area on the other side of Taylor, that they actually, there were reports of these creatures doing things, seeing them in the 70s, but not in that particular area anymore, going toward Apache Pass, that they were gone. But I was at a slumber party, you know, when I was a little kid, and they claimed to have seen these creatures. Now, Scorp can attest to the fact that that really happened, you know, to the kids that were there with me. I didn't see it, but they saw it. And actually, Scorp has been in my hometown, and he talked to one of them that that told him that he saw this thing, and he described it. He said it looked like ape face,
gray, like a white. He said
whitish gray, gray face,
white face, brown hair, big forehead, long arms, big hands.
Some of the kids claimed that it was black or blackish brown, and some of the kids claimed that it was just brown, which is weird because it was dark at night. So maybe they don't, you know, I've always wondered about that, but I personally did not see it, folks. I still can't say that I've seen a Bigfoot, so I don't know. You know, I'd be thrilled to see one if from a long distance away, not especially those the aggressive, violent ones. You know, but you know there's several accounts of these things. You know, like going back into history, but you have to dig and you have to be willing to go and talk to these old timers that, you know, and be able to go onto their land to talk to them. And you got to talk to somebody that can talk to them, that'll let you talk to them. You know, it's not as easy as just going and, you know, walking up to somebody at a store and saying, hey, you know what, you got to be able to track these people down, you know. And over the years, I did that, you know. And finally talking to my last two cousins about it was the last piece of the puzzle that I needed. I recently did that to get the rest of the story, to make sure I wasn't missing anything or leaving anything out. But yeah, that's that story. And eventually that family, they moved out of the area and moved further away, you know, on the other side of Apache Pass to get away from those creatures, because they didn't really leave it alone. According to the legend, they went to that other farm, which was adjacent to my great-grandfather's farm, and threw rocks and did things until they chased that family off. And what the big insult, I guess, was just they shot one of them. But inadvertently, it may have been what ended up starting a war that may ultimately have led to these things being not necessarily completely wiped out,
but relocating
or being almost driven to extinction.
Talk about, you know, it's so funny in the beginning how we were talking about, you know, not wearing your heart on your sleeve and stuff like that. But these things went out to actively do like harm to others, and then they got harm done to them.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no. And then they had to go, come on.
Hey, we planned it that way, folks. Yeah, that's a ticket. Yeah, we planned it that way. That's how we started out talking like that, see?
Yeah.
No, seriously though, no, we didn't.
Yeah,
This is
that was a funny
It's
coincidence.
kind of funny coincidence, but yeah, the truth is that that's what happened. But I guess in all seriousness, if you break it down and you look at it from just analyze it, I think what happened was, at that time, they were still very territorial and they kind of tolerated the people being there, and they would just take an animal or two here and there, and there was kind of an uneasiness about it. But I think what ended up happening when they dug up the grave, that didn't set well, with the dad, and of course they find his body up in a tree, which is not,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, and then of course this whole thing, I mean, and we've heard stories of dogmen laying siege to people's ranches. I mean, there's been several stories about that, and of course the Hernandez Ranch, we know. I've told that story on Dogman Encounters. What was told to me by those families in Scorp, you've met their real names aren't Hernandez, but you've met who we call Jerry, the cabinet maker, and you've talked to them and you've been there, and you haven't heard as much as I have from them, but you've talked to them about that.
I've talked to them about it, and I've heard bits and pieces here and there.
Yeah, and so that has happened, but this is the Bigfoot creatures. These do not sound like Dogman. From what you've heard Jerry and his brothers talk about, this does not sound like Dogman.
No, it doesn't.
It sounds very much like Bigfoot type creatures or whatever.
Yeah, and going back to what you're saying about how it was about being a bad thing or make a bad feeling when they dug up the body. What people got to remember is back in that time, people were more highly religious.
Oh yeah.
So them digging up the body to
That's
most people in
desecration.
it kind of kept the soul from moving on to where it got to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what
well, being
made
Irish
them
too,
mad,
they were probably Catholic.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they thought of that. They might have been pretty upset and then thought, well, oh no, John's not going to go to heaven now. He's in purgatory, you evil demons. I'm going to shoot you now in your butt. And he missed and hit the side of him. But anyway,
even if they weren't religious, I believe you can't just dig up people like that. I mean,
yeah.
I understand to them they probably don't do that or whatever, but still, it's still a messed up thing.
Yeah, I mean,
you like even in not being religious, it's an insult to have one of your relatives dug up, but it's even more so if you are considering,
and especially back then,
considering the body's still kind of tied to the soul.
Yeah, and of course the way that people believe different views, who knows? I don't know that. I mean, they may not have been Catholic. Not all Irish are Catholic, but I mean, they may have been. I don't know 100% a lot about that family. The records of them just kind of fade away because they left the area. And of course, that's not their real last name, but it is, and it was an Irish name. But you got to think, neighbors, they were all helping each other out. Like, something goes down like that nowadays, good luck. Good luck trying to find some neighbors to come and pull you out.
Yeah,
they're going to be like,
everybody
good luck with that,
nowadays is
buddy.
all about me.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe some
let's
good
help each other to progress and to do something better.
Yeah, maybe some good country folks, maybe. But now, I'd be hard
definitely
pressed.
not here in the city.
Yeah, you definitely have to kind of be on your own with that. I don't think that anybody's going to come and rescue you from.
I think
savage
what it
Bigfoot.
is technology. Since it's so easy to call 911. Like, why would you go to your neighbors to ask for help?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Well, to help you move out of there, though.
And
Cops ain't going to help you move out of there.
No. And it still used to be like that in Hispanic neighborhoods. Like when I grew up, and where I grew up, neighborhoods kind of everybody knew everybody. And
you had kind of
like
a Hispanic.
So it surprises me now when I go back and I don't see kids playing outside like we used to when I was younger. And you don't see.
No, you got all these people abducting them.
Yeah,
and all kinds
you don't
crazy
see families
stuff,
interacting with each other like we did back then. Because
Asian families,
whenever there was a birthday party in the neighborhood, everybody in the neighborhood was at that house for that party.
Mm-hmm.
Asian families, we're still close.
Very tight.
Yeah, we're very tight.
Yeah,
our neighborhoods are.
What shocked me too about your family, Tony, is like how they help each other. Yeah. Like your mom had all this furniture stuff, and like she was like, it was given to me, and I'm like, who's giving you furniture? It was the other Vietnamese people in the community.
We say family, it's not family.
It's not
like
family.
You're
No,
my uncle. Like it's just people.
Yeah,
that we just consider like we're close enough to where you're Asian, I'm Asian, and we know each other well enough to you're just family now.
Because I was like, y'all had a beat up table, and I was like. Telling Cindy, your sister, I was like, where'd you get this table? And she's like, oh, friends of our family, the Vietnamese community, I kept hearing that, gave it to us. And I'm like, they're like family. And I'm like, So eventually, I ended up buying for Christmas. I bought your mom
beautiful table. She still has it.
Yeah, I bought that table from a guy that actually worked with my dad, and it was moving to Tennessee, and he was working for Samsung, and he was like,
"Take it, yeah."
Yeah, and so he sold it to me, and I bought it for Christmas for your mom, and she almost came to tears because, you know, everything y'all had was like given to you by other people from the Vietnamese community. But if you don't see that now, I mean,
no. And it's not like we were poor. We were middle. We were doing well off. It's just that people in the Vietnamese, we very
take care of each other.
Yeah. So like if we didn't need something, we didn't feel like it was right to just throw it away if someone else could use it. So we would just ask around, like, "Hey, does anyone need this?"
The way
you wouldn't sell it either. Y'all
up.
would give it away.
Yeah. Oh no.
No. That's the way it was.
Well,
when
your
I grew
neighborhood's
up.
that way too.
My
Scorp.
neighborhood, my grandparents' neighborhood was like that too. My grandparents, if they welcomed you into the house, you weren't a friend, you were family.
Family, yeah.
That's the way my grandparents were. God rest their souls.
I noticed that with your family too. Like every weekend, they would get together at somebody's
still
family.
Get together. My sisters will go to visit my mom and dad.
And then this is another cool thing about your family, Scorp, is once a month, Tony, at the last Sunday of every month, right, Scorp?
We used to do that before my grandma passed away.
Before your grandma passed away, God rest her soul.
Yeah, but they would the whole family
had like family reunions, basically.
Every last Sunday.
Every last Sunday of the month, we go to my grandma's house and help with any chores that need to be done, repairs, and then we'd have a dinner. A dinner, yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, because like my family's all in like either Vietnam, Denver, Colorado. We're all very spread out, so we didn't have that down here. So we had to rely on our community.
Yeah, the Vietnamese community.
But it's funny because there's a great joke by Sebastian Montesanto, something like that. He's an Italian guy, but he's basically saying like how different it is now compared to back then. If someone rings on your doorbell. Like back then, if someone rang on your doorbell, you're like, "Oh, we got to guess. Who is it?"
Cool, yeah.
It's exciting. Like, who is that? Like, you just welcome in, like, "Oh, hey, what's up?" Like, people had pie and stuff. And now, like, when people rings the doorbells, like, everyone grabs like weapons and stuff. Like, scared, trying to figure out who it is.
You're like, "Who is this?
Who's this now?
Who will be there?
Why are you knocking on my door? What do you want? Are you? Is this a home invasion?
Friend or foe? Friend or foe?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, like when we get a knock on the door, we all get up.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, but that's the thing, though. I mean, you know, this family risks the other surrounding families risk life and limb to expurgate them from that property to get them out of there. And these creatures were harassing them and attacking them and
relentlessly.
Yeah, they were just nasty things, you know. But anyways, we had a good talk, and we will be talking, if we haven't already, we're going to talk about that Headless Horseman, and we're going to talk about the Hoxie Bridge and some weird encounters have happened out there.
An update on Hernandez Ranch. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of comments and stuff.
We're going to get to that too. We just kind of get a little more information, folks. We'll get it out there, and if we haven't released it already by this point, because we don't know when.
We have a lot of shows
backlog.
Right now. We have a lot of shows. I promise you that we will. We're going to be going for a while. So.
Yeah. Tony,
you've given a story and they haven't gotten to it yet, or we haven't gotten to it yet. Just give it time; it'll come around.
Mm-hmm.
Not even just me. Sometimes I'm not even here because I have to work, and you'll have some of the other guys here.
If you people would give us more money, we could do more shows and could do more research instead of having to live on post. God. Anyway,
this has been
good. People, man. I swear. Here we are slaving over hot microphones for you.
Yeah, sitting in our cool AC slaving.
In this little cramped studio with our fully stocked fridge. God.
Our pets and our,
what is this? The depression?
The suffering we have to deal with.
All right, guys. That's all the time we have for tonight, folks. From me, my buddy Scorp, my godson Tony, little Banjo, who's always in the studio with Tony, his little buddy. Whatever tree you're hiding up from Dogman, whatever evil doll is threatening to kill you and chasing you through the house, whatever gargoyle swooping down over your car, good night.